Hello, everyone. Welcome to the English Chatcast. I'm Ben, and I'm here with my co-host, Anna.
Hi there, I'm Anna, and we're so excited you're here.
Before we dive in today, we'd absolutely love it if you could hit that like button and subscribe to the English Chatcast channel. It really helps us reach more English learners around the world.
Exactly! When you subscribe and like our videos, it tells the algorithm that our content is valuable, which means YouTube will show it to more people who are trying to improve their English. So you're literally helping other learners find us.
Perfect! So today we're talking about something that I think a lot of English learners struggle with: how to confidently and naturally ask questions about other people when you're having conversations.
Oh, this is such a good topic, Ben. I remember when I was growing up bilingual, my mom only speaks Spanish, so I was constantly translating between English and Spanish. And I noticed that the way we ask personal questions is so different between cultures.
Right, yeah. And I've experienced that firsthand, too. I've been to the Philippines so many times. Manila, Cebu, Davao, and I love how warm and curious Filipino culture is. But I had to learn that what feels natural there might come across differently in American English conversations.
Exactly. So let's start with the big picture. Why does asking good questions even matter?
Great question. So asking good questions is basically the secret to having meaningful conversations and building real connections with people. When you ask thoughtful questions, you show that you're genuinely interested in the other person. And here's the thing, most people actually love talking about themselves when they feel like someone is really listening. So good questions make conversations flow naturally instead of feeling forced or awkward.
Plus, and this is huge for English learners, asking questions takes the pressure off you to constantly think of things to say. The other person does most of the talking, and you just need to listen and respond naturally.
That's such a good point. So let's break down the types of questions. Anna, what's the difference between open-ended and closed-ended questions?
Okay, so closed-ended questions are the ones that usually get you just a yes, no, or one-word answer, like, do you like your job? Or are you from here? They're not bad, but they don't really keep the conversation going.
Right.
Open-ended questions are the magic ones. They start with words like what, how, why, tell me about. Like instead of do you like your job, you could ask what's the best part about your job? Or how did you get into that field?
Perfect example. And here's a pro tip. You can actually turn close-ended questions into open-ended ones really easily. So if someone asks you, do you like living here? You could answer and then flip it. Yes, I love it. The weather's amazing. What brought you to this area?
Oh, that's so smart! You're basically redirecting the conversation back to them with a better question.
Exactly. Now let's talk about showing genuine interest, because this is where a lot of non-native speakers feel unsure. Anna, what's your take on this?
So the key is that your interest has to feel real, not forced. Americans can usually tell when someone is just asking questions to be polite versus when they actually care about the answer.
Yeah.
One way to show genuine interest is to ask follow-up questions that build on what they just said. So if someone says, I'm a teacher, don't just say, oh, cool, and move on. Ask something like, what grade do you teach? Or what's that like right now with everything going on in education?
And body language is huge here too. In American culture, maintaining eye contact while someone's talking shows you're engaged. Nodding occasionally, leaning in slightly, these little things make a big difference.
Totally. And your tone matters just as much as your words. If you ask, how was your weekend? In a flat, disinterested voice, it's not going to land well.
Right, so let's practice some natural follow-up techniques. Anna, let's do a quick role play. I'll start. I just got back from a trip to Japan.
Oh, wow. What was the highlight of your trip?
Perfect. Notice how Anna didn't just say, "That's cool." She asked for a specific detail. I could answer that, and then she could follow up with something like, "Was it your first time there?" Or, "How was the food different from what you expected?"
Exactly. And here's another technique, echoing back what someone said, but as a question. So if I say, I just started learning guitar, you could say, guitar? What made you choose that instrument?
Love that. Now let's talk about cultural considerations, because this is really important. In American English conversations, there are some unwritten rules about what's okay to ask and what might be too personal.
Yeah, this is tricky because it varies so much by culture. In general, Americans are pretty open about talking about work, hobbies, travel, where they're from, their family in general terms.
Right.
But things to be careful about, especially when you first meet someone, asking about age, salary, weight, relationship status in detail, political views, or anything really personal about their family.
And here's a good rule of thumb. Start broad and let them decide how much detail to share. So instead of, "Are you married?" you could ask, "Do you have family in the area?" That gives them the choice to talk about a spouse, kids, parents, or just say no.
And speaking of context, the setting really matters too. Questions that work great at a casual party might not work in a professional networking event, and vice versa.
Exactly. So at a professional event, you might ask, "What brings you to this conference?" Or, "How are you finding the industry these days?" But at a backyard barbecue, you could be more casual, like, "How do you know Sarah?" Or, "Have you tried the potato salad yet?"
And in workplace settings, Americans tend to appreciate questions that show you're thinking strategically, or that you're trying to understand the bigger picture. Like, what are the biggest challenges facing your team right now? Instead of just, how's work?
Here's something else to consider: generational differences. Younger Americans might be totally fine with questions about social media or streaming preferences, while older generations might prefer questions about family, community involvement, or traditional hobbies.
You know, Ben, we should mention that there are regional differences too. Like, people in the South tend to be more open to personal questions and longer conversations with strangers, while in places like New York, people might prefer more direct, efficient interactions.
Great point. In the Midwest, people might chat about weather as a genuine conversation starter, while on the West Coast, conversations often focus more on lifestyle and interests. The key is to observe and adapt to the local culture wherever you are. Now let's talk about some common mistakes that we hear English learners make when asking questions.
Oh, this is important. One big mistake is asking too many questions in a row without sharing anything about yourself. It starts to feel like an interview instead of a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
So balance is key. Ask a question, listen to their answer, maybe share a related experience of your own, then ask another question. It should feel like a tennis match, back and forth.
Another mistake is asking questions that are too vague, like, "How are things?" Well, what things? Their job, their family, their health? Be more specific. How's the new job going? Or how are you settling into the neighborhood?
And here's one I see a lot. Asking, "Where are you from?" to someone who clearly has an accent or looks like they might be from another country. It's not necessarily wrong, but it can feel a bit, I don't know.
Like they're being singled out?
Exactly. A better approach might be to wait for it to come up naturally, or ask something like, "Have you been in this area long?" which feels more neutral.
And if someone seems uncomfortable with a question or gives a short answer, just move on to something else. Don't push.
Good point. Now here's a really practical tip for remembering what people tell you, because that's essential for building relationships. And what works for you?
So this is something I had to learn because my brain processes English and Spanish differently. What I do is try to connect new information to something I already know about the person or to something in my own life.
Yeah.
So if someone tells me they're a nurse, I might think, okay, like my cousin Maria. Or if they mention they love hiking, I connect it to my own experience with outdoor activities. Making those mental connections really helps me remember.
That's brilliant. And here's another trick. Repeat important information back to them in your follow-up question. So if they say, I'm a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital, your next question could be, oh wow, pediatric nursing must be really rewarding. What made you choose to work with kids?
Right, you're reinforcing the information for yourself while showing them you were really listening.
Okay, let's put this all together with some practice scenarios. Anna, let's do some role plays to demonstrate these techniques. I'll give you different situations, and you show us how to naturally build conversations. Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here's the first scenario. You're waiting in line at a grocery store, and the person in front of you has a cart full of ingredients that look like they're for a big party. How would you start a conversation?
Oh, I'd probably say something like, wow, looks like you're planning something fun. Is it a special occasion? It's friendly, shows I noticed without being nosy, and gives them the choice to share as much or as little as they want.
Perfect approach. Notice how that opens the door for them to say anything from just having friends over to it's my daughter's birthday party to my book club is meeting. And then you could follow up based on what they share. Great. Now let's try a second scenario. Imagine you're at a coffee shop and the person next to you says, I'm so tired. I just finished a double shift at the restaurant.
Oh gosh, a double shift? That sounds exhausting. What kind of restaurant do you work at?
Perfect. You acknowledged how they're feeling, showed empathy, and then asked an open-ended question that lets them share more. They could tell you about the cuisine, the atmosphere, whether they're a server or in the kitchen.
And depending on their answer, I could follow up with questions like, how long have you been working there? Or what's the busiest time of day? Or even, do you enjoy the restaurant industry?
Exactly. See how one good question can open up so many conversation paths? That's the goal, to create natural opportunities for people to share what they want to share.
And this brings up something really important about practice scenarios, reading social cues. If someone gives you a short answer or seems like they're in a hurry, that's usually a signal that they're not up for a long conversation. Respect that.
Absolutely. Body language tells you a lot too. If someone is looking at their phone, glancing around, or giving one-word answers, those are all hints that maybe they're not in a chatty mood, and that's totally fine.
And remember, the best conversations happen when both people feel comfortable and interested. It's not about asking perfect questions. It's about being genuinely curious about other people.
So true. Before we wrap up, let's give our listeners some homework. This week, try to have one conversation where you focus just on asking thoughtful follow-up questions instead of worrying about what you're going to say next.
Great idea. And practice turning closed-ended questions into open-ended ones. You'll be amazed at how much more interesting your conversations become.
Perfect. Well, that's all for today's episode of the English Chatcast. Thanks for joining us to learn about asking confident questions in English conversations.
Until next time, keep practicing, keep listening, and remember, learning English with us is
a piece of cake. Thanks for listening, everyone. See you next time on the English Chatcast.